Okay, so I recently went speed dating and I promised I'd talk to you about how to do speed dating better, mainly for the dudes. I guess this could also help chicks, but I'm not a dude, so I don't know what dudes are looking for in a chick. But having interacted with a bunch of dudes through the night, I'm not exactly a good representation of what females are looking for, but there are some social pointers that I can give and things that I notice the dudes doing or not doing that just they could have improved on. Okay, so, speed dating, it depends on how it runs wherever you're going. But if they give you a card or like a name tag or a number or something, please do show it to me. Because like sometimes your name, I might not necessarily pick it up, especially if it's loud. It might be spelt an odd way, and maybe it's easier to remember the number. I don't know, but just like actually show me the physical thing. There were some people who told me their name but didn't show me the card, and it's just an extra visual cue, and especially if your name is a bit odd, it helps. My name is a bit odd, so I did show mine every single time. The other thing is, with this one, when we went in, people told their name to the organizer and they wrote it on the card and like manually assigned everyone. But then you go into the app and you put your name in. Make sure your name on the app is the same as the name that you gave the organizer. Otherwise, like, how am I sure that I'm when I'm trying to go through matches later, how do I know it's definitely you? I mean, I figured it out because there weren't too many who did this, but just in case. And also, like, luckily no one had the same name. I don't know how people would manage that, but if the app has an option, or whatever the matching platform is, if it has an option to put your photo in, please put that too. Because imagine if there were two people called Bob, and I'm like, which Bob am I trying to match or not match with? If you have your photo there, then I know it's you. Instead of, like, as a female, if you came across that situation and you liked one Bob but not the other, would you match both of them? No, because the other one could be a total creep and you don't want to get his hopes up and then potentially get stalked or whatever. You'd probably just be like, shit, well, the other Bob clearly didn't care enough to put his photo in there. I guess he can get fucked and I'll say no to both of them. So, fill out your details properly, put your picture in. Doesn't have to be an amazing picture, just something so that I can recognize you. Don't assume that I'm going to remember everything. I am someone who is, like, generally females are better at social things, and I can socially interact fine, but I'm bad at recognizing people and remembering and connecting people's names to faces to, like, what we talked about. I tend to, like, remember one of those things and maybe not the others, but the more information you can give when you put it in the platform, the better. The more chance I'm going to remember which one you are, and if I wanted to connect, then I will say yes, okay. But if I'm not sure, I might be more cautious and just not connect. So that's sort of like the admin-y side of things. Try and get all that right. Okay, now, with this one, punctuality, just be on time to any event you go to. Okay, so in terms of actually interacting with chicks, so show your card, your name tag, whatever, introduce yourself. Don't start off saying, so how are you finding speed dating? Who cares? Like, the important thing is to get to know each other, not how you're feeling about speed dating, because a lot of people, it seemed to be their first time, and it's certainly my first time, and I did get tired of telling people, like, it's interesting, I've never been to one of these before. Like, that was my response pretty much every time someone asked me that. I'm like, this doesn't tell you anything, it doesn't tell me anything about you, it tells me that you don't know what to talk about. The ones that impressed me more were the ones who came in and got right down to business and were like, hey, I'm so-and-so, so what do you do? Or maybe say something about themselves, like get into the getting to know you part straight away. Don't be like that, like, and also don't complain about the speed dating thing. I did have a couple who were telling me, like, it's too noisy or it's not set up well or whatever. I'm like, I don't care. We're trying to get to know each other. We're not trying to complain about this being an imperfect scenario. And yeah, like, it's fun to bitch about how speed dating apps suck, but that doesn't really tell much about each other. And speaking of, there was one dude who was really good. I can't remember which one it was though, but because my name is Japanese, that, like, when I showed my name, that was actually if someone has an interesting name, you can ask them about their background. That can be your icebreaker, your jumping off point. Just the problem with this conversation is, like I mentioned, my mum being Japanese and my dad being so white that he walks outside and gets sunburned kind of level of white. But somehow we got onto the topic of, like, how they met, and, my parents, they kind of eloped. And so that's, like, an interesting story in itself, but that's about my parents. That's not about me. That's not about you. That's not about getting to know each other. That's about getting to know my parents, right? And that guy, he realized he'd asked kind of the wrong question. And so he's like, oh, that sounds really interesting, but obviously we're here to talk to each other, about each other. And so he did a really good job bringing the topic back to getting to know each other. So well done to that guy. Of course, he didn't know that by asking about, my parents' background and how they managed to meet, like, I can't remember the exact question. Maybe it was like, did they meet here or something? But yeah, he realized he wouldn't have known that they had such an interesting story, and he did realize, and he did bring it back. Another thing, work on your handshakes. Like, I know this isn't employment, but there were a lot of dudes who just came over. Not everyone shook my hand. Some of them had a good handshake, and then there were some that were really weak. And I know this is a minor thing, and it's not the most important thing in the world, but it does show confidence if you can give a firm handshake. Not like you're crushing someone, just a firm handshake instead of a weak handshake. If you come in with a weak handshake, it does sort of give away, I don't know, nervous vibes. And maybe, I don't know if women like this or not, but for me, it just sort of seemed odd. And keeping in mind that I'm mentally ill, schizoid personality disorder, I'm not good with social stuff. But from an evolutionary perspective, in general, on average, as a stereotype, okay, not everyone, but generally females are looking for males who can provide, males who are strong, that kind of stuff. And so you need to come in with a strong, confident handshake to sort of hopefully trigger some of that biological thing where the women are like, okay, this is a strong man who can provide kind of thing. Now, that's not to say you don't have to be a strong man who can provide, but you're playing on the biological thing there, right? So it's a little bit shady, I guess, but I did feel like when I was shaking these guys' hand and there was, like, just nothing in it, I was like, okay. That did, like, stand out in my brain as like, oh, that's not how a handshake's meant to be. Okay, minor point, take it or leave it. I just think that that's a thing. I don't mean to insult anyone who doesn't like the way that biology stuff, sort of creates these stereotypes and these gender roles and whatever, but that was a thing. That was just a thing that stood out in my mind. Work on your handshakes. Like, it's the same in business. If you can come in with that confidence, I think there's something kind of primal or, subconscious that makes a good handshake worth doing and sends certain signals that we're just not conscious of. It would be nice if socializing and interacting with people was all, like, logical and, like, facts-based and whatever. But we're not like that. We didn't evolve to be purely logical beings. So those kinds of subtle cues, body language and all that, those things are important. And, like, the easiest basic thing, you come in with your introduction, I'm so-and-so, here's a handshake, a nice firm handshake. Or some of them, did a handshake as they were leaving, and yeah, but I think it's better to do it at the start, get a nice firm handshake out of the way. Yeah. I think those are my main tips, really. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else, but those are the ones that really stood out to me, is like, get the introduction right, and then, whatever the basics are in terms of getting to know each other, and then hopefully you will hit on a topic that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I guess in general with social interactions as well, if you want someone to like you, asking them about themselves and getting them to talk about themselves, that works. But I think sometimes I do it from a cynical perspective because I've learned too much about these things and I don't genuinely have interest in other people. That's just not part of like the schizoid nature, but I can simulate it, and so people end up liking me and I'm like, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. But no, if you genuinely want someone to like you, that's a technique. Like if you learn about those kinds of things. Also, mirroring body language. Now, this is actually, I should have put this in the previous video. So we're past like the real tips, but mirroring body language can create a sense of connection between two people. The problem for me as a female, and maybe this is a tip for females, I started off with more feminine body language because I was trying to play the role of being a female and not scare off the dudes too much. But I think I tend towards slightly more masculine body language at times, and I find it more comfortable. I had comments about that when I was a kid, and so I think it's just a thing about how I am. But towards the end of the night, like a lot of the dudes would come and sit next to me, and some of them would do that. In the beginning of the night, I would sit sort of politely like a chick. Slightly more closed body language, but turn towards them and sort of whatever. But as I my physically got a bit tired, I did start doing this back, and it was okay for a bit. But then I noticed later in the night, if I was already doing this, some of the dudes would then sit with the more closed body language, and maybe I put off some of the dudes there. And they were starting to sit further and further away from me, which was also interesting. So maybe that's a tip for the girls, I don't know. Try not to scare them with like open body language. Like you do want to be open, you don't want to be like super closed, because that has sort of get away from me vibes, and if you're at a speed dating thing, you're not trying to give off those vibes. But I think for females to males, this is too much like subtle overconfidence. I don't know, like dudes want to be, in general, want to be in that role of having the more confidence, having the larger body size. So I think I actually put off some of the dudes, but like I guess, focus. If the girl does do that, don't be too scared of me. It's just because that's more comfortable for me. But yeah, I don't know. I was dressed pretty nutty, so maybe they were already scared of me. And then when I started doing that sort of blokey body language, I put them off a bit more. Yeah, that was fine for dudes though. And it was good that none of them tried to put their arm around me. Don't touch people. And I think even in the rules it said you're not supposed to touch anyone. So cool. Just that's another observation of something that maybe I did wrong because I kind of struggled to care. Yeah, okay, that's probably all that I've got. When you're leaving, just make notes in your app so you don't forget who you were just talking to and whether or not you liked them, because that's a mistake that I made. I didn't take notes throughout the night, and then I couldn't remember which person was which. Anything else? No, I think I covered the main ones and I'm just rambling at this point. Yeah, don't be scared to make the first "so what do you do" kind of thing. People asking me about my job was a little bit awkward because I'm not currently formally employed. But, you know, maybe that's something that you need to know. Sorry, there's just fluff flying around. Maybe that's something that you need to... I don't know. There's probably better videos you could have watched, and I'm sorry I wasted your time. Bye!